Picture a medieval court, stone halls lit by torchlight, nobles in velvet and silk, a king on his throne. Now picture the one person in that room who could mock the king to his face and live. That was the jester, part comedian, part critic, part confidant. But the life of a medieval jester was far more complex than the jingling bells and colorful costumes suggest. These weren't just entertainers. They were psychologists, political advisors, and sometimes the only honest voice a ruler would ever hear. Medieval jesters came from all walks of life. Some were born into poverty and used wit as their way out. Others were educated men who chose the fool's motley over the scholar's robe. A surprising number were people with dwarfism or physical disabilities. Medieval society gave them few options, and entertaining became a viable profession. Not every jester was a professional entertainer. Some were natural fools, people with intellectual disabilities or mental illness who were kept at court for amusement, a practice that's deeply disturbing by modern standards. But the professional jesters, the artificial fools, were sharp, calculating performers who wielded humor like a weapon. To become a court jester required genuine talent. You needed to be quick-witted enough to improvise jokes on the spot, skilled enough to juggle, tumble, or play instruments, and brave enough to walk the razor's edge between humor and treason. One wrong joke could mean prison or worse. The primary job was simple: make people laugh. Jesters performed at feasts, tournaments, and celebrations. They juggled, told jokes, sang satirical songs, performed acrobatics, and engaged in slapstick comedy. They might insult nobles, mock priests, or create elaborate pranks. Medieval humor was often crude. Fart jokes were as popular then as they are now. But the jester's real power lay in their unique social position. They existed outside the normal hierarchy. They could move freely between the servants' quarters and the king's chamber. They could speak truths that would get anyone else executed. Many a true word is spoken in jest wasn't just a saying, it was the jester's professional doctrine. Kings lived in bubbles of flattery and fear. Courtiers told them what they wanted to hear. Advisors had their own agendas. But the jester could say, "Your Majesty, that decision was idiotic," and frame it as a joke. Smart rulers recognized this value. A good jester was a pressure valve for criticism, a reality check, and sometimes the only person giving honest counsel. Some jesters became genuine confidants and advisors. Triboulet, jester to King Francis I of France, wielded considerable influence at court. When a nobleman threatened to hang Triboulet for a joke, the king protected him, demonstrating the jester's protected status. Will Sommers, jester to Henry VIII, allegedly helped negotiate peace between the king and his daughter Mary when no one else could approach the volatile monarch. A court jester's daily routine varied wildly depending on their employer and status. Top jesters at royal courts lived comfortable lives. They received regular wages, fine clothing, though deliberately ridiculous, comfortable rooms in the castle, and plenty of food. They were essentially part of the household staff, but with far more freedom and considerably higher status than servants. Lesser jesters at smaller noble courts had less security. They might be dismissed on a whim or struggle to maintain favor. Traveling jesters had it worse, moving from town to town, performing at fairs and in taverns, never knowing where their next meal would come from. Court jesters woke when their lord woke. They might attend the morning meal, entertaining during breakfast. They'd be present at council meetings, ready to lighten the mood with a joke or song. Afternoons might involve rehearsing new material, practicing tricks, or simply being available if called upon. Evenings brought feasts, prime time for jesting. But the job never really stopped. A jester was always on. They had to read the room constantly, gauge moods, know when to speak and when to stay silent. They needed to remember which nobles had feuds with which, what political situations were too sensitive to mock, and how far they could push before crossing into danger. The jester's iconic outfit, the motley, was instantly recognizable. It typically consisted of a party-colored tunic, divided into contrasting colors like red and yellow or green and blue, tights and curled-toe shoes. The famous three-pointed hat with bells jingled with every movement, announcing the jester's presence. but the costume served a purpose beyond mere identification. It marked the jester as someone outside normal social rules. The bright, clashing colors made them visible, but also slightly absurd. You couldn't take someone seriously when dressed like that, which gave them freedom to say outrageous things. The bells meant they could never sneak up on anyone or move silently, reinforcing their role as open, non-threatening figures. Many jesters carried props. A marotte, a stick with a carved head wearing a miniature jester's cap, served as both a prop for jokes and a symbol of office. Some viewed it as a mock scepter, a parody of royal authority. Jesters also carried bladders, inflated pig or sheep bladders, used for slapstick comedy, hitting people with loud but harmless whacks. Make no mistake, being a jester was dangerous work. Yes, they had license to mock, but that license had limits. Cross the wrong line, offend the wrong person, or misjudge your audience, and consequences followed swiftly. Some rulers had volatile tempers. Henry VIII, for all his fondness for Will Sommers, wasn't known for his patience. Other jesters faced jealous courtiers who resented their influence or sought revenge for public humiliation. A jester who made powerful enemies often found themselves in serious trouble. Jesters could be beaten, imprisoned, or even executed. Hittard and Hariolf, jesters to King Philip IV of France, were both punished harshly for their jokes. One was imprisoned, the other mutilated. The protection jesters enjoyed depended entirely on their ruler's mood and favor. Moreover, jesters lived with constant psychological pressure. They had to be funny on command, often while dealing with their own problems. They performed emotional labor, lifting others' spirits while potentially suffering themselves, and they walked a tightrope between honesty and flattery, knowing that too much of either could prove fatal. History remembers several exceptional jesters. Triboulet, already mentioned, served two French kings and became so famous that Victor Hugo based the character Rigoletto on him. His quick wit and fearlessness made him a legend. Stanchik, court jester to three Polish kings, was renowned for his political insight. Paintings depict him as a melancholy figure, troubled by Poland's political problems, while nobles dance obliviously. He represents the jester as tragic commentator on human folly. Archibald Armstrong, known as Archie, served James I and Charles I of England. He grew so powerful and bold that he eventually went too far, mocking Archbishop Laud, and was dismissed from court. His career demonstrates both the heights jesters could reach and the dangers of overstepping. Jane Fool, or Jane the Fool, served Mary I of England, one of the few recorded female jesters. Little is known about her life, but her existence challenges assumptions about jesters being exclusively male. By the 17th century, the age of the court jester was ending. Several factors contributed to this decline. The Renaissance brought changing attitudes about humor and dignity. The rise of the printing press meant jokes and satire could spread through pamphlets and books, rather than requiring live performance. Professional theater companies emerged, offering more sophisticated entertainment. Political changes mattered too. Absolute monarchs surrounded themselves with formal courts where jesters' irreverence seemed inappropriate. The Enlightenment emphasized reason and dignity, leaving less room for the licensed fool. By the 18th century, court jesters had largely vanished from European courts, replaced by other forms of entertainment and counsel. The role didn't disappear entirely. It evolved into court dwarfs, who still entertained but with less of the jester's political function, and eventually into modern comedians and satirists. Yet the jester's legacy endures. Modern comedians, especially political satirists, are direct descendants of medieval jesters. They speak truth to power through humor, mock the powerful, and sometimes face consequences for going too far. Court jesters pioneered the idea that comedy could be both entertainment and social commentary. The phrase "playing the fool" and the concept of the wise fool come from this tradition. Shakespeare's fools, like Fest in Twelfth Night or the Fool in King Lear, are philosophical commentators who see truths hidden from supposedly wiser characters. The archetype of the trickster who disrupts social order while revealing deeper truths appears across cultures and owes much to the jester tradition. Medieval jesters remind us that laughter is powerful. In an age of rigid hierarchy and absolute power, jesters created spaces for criticism, humanity, and truth. They proved that sometimes the best way to speak wisdom is through foolishness, and that making someone laugh might be the most subversive act of all.